walker, so I have to control my walks. In Scripture, there are so many secrets and mysteries that we have to study in order to really grasp and know the meaning. And so today we're going to talk about the mystery of the parable. And remember, I am your reminder. I am not your teacher, I am your reminder. Because as I've said before, I look out here and hear all of these brain trusts scripturally, and you know it all. So what I'm going to tell you, you've heard before, I'm sure. But you know what? God does that. He wants us to be reminded at times. So I'm going to remind you about the parable, the mystery of the parable. Do you know it was a mystery? The kingdom at one time was also a mystery. The church age was a mystery too. And of course, knowing Scripture is when these things get revealed. Now, according to my old Scofield King James Bible, Scofield says that a mystery is previously hidden truths, now divinely revealed. And so when it's divinely revealed, we know where it's coming from. In other words, Matthew heard from Jesus. And of course, Jesus is God, so he was the channel for all of these understandings that we finally get hold of and grasp through reading the Word. And the parable, to understand the parable, it is a comparison of two things, often through a story that has two meanings. Now, I want to ask you a question. Can I walk? I want to ask you a question. How many of you, and you feel free to raise your hands, okay? How many of you have read in your lifetime Alice in Wonderland? Okay. And a few of you have not. Shame on you. No, I'm just kidding. Alice in Wonderland, sometimes in school situations, I have asked students that, and they'll say, no, I haven't, but I will. Or, yes, I have. Why are you asking that question? Well, Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll took a situation, a little story for children, but he had a deeper meaning for adults. So we can almost look at the parable. Now, I'm not saying Lewis Carroll was Jesus, no. But I'm just giving a comparison. The parable is a comparison like the childhood story of Alice in Wonderland and the adults looking at Alice in Wonderland and seeing social and cultural issues there. So when we think of the parable in Scripture, we think of the two things as being, one being earthly and physical. The other side, the other spectrum of the parable, the other part of the comparison, we think of spiritual. Okay? So there are the two comparisons. And this is what Jesus, believe it or not, was not the first one to use the parable. It was a Near East method of teaching, but he was a master of the parable. And if you read into Matthew, of course there are 7 different parables right there. Excuse me, I either have to dot my I or my nose. This kind is my nose, I'm sorry. But we find that those 7, we're not gonna take up all those 7. I mean, we're just going through 1 through 23, which of course is the parable that we have all read 1,000,000 times. And that is the sower and the seed. So that's the one we're gonna concentrate on when we get to reading scripture. Okay, so Jesus used the parable to do what? To reveal these mysteries, spiritual truths, and he used earthly comparisons. Now, you know what? Jesus was really kind because he would use situations that whoever he was preaching to, that they would understand. And in this particular case, he uses the agrarian story. Now, I'm going to get a little personal here. How many of you have an agrarian background? Raise your hand. Nobody. You didn't go far enough back in your generation, so I beg your pardon. Every one of you should be raising your hands, because if we go back in our own personal history, we'll find somebody who is agrarian. Now, I was very fortunate because I had a mother who had an agrarian background and a dad who did too. Right, Charles? Yes. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little personal agrarian story, and it takes us back to when I was 6 years old. There's somebody in here who likes to tell stories, so this is my story. And it's in the 1st grade, and it pertains to Walcoats Laboratory School. And I had a teacher who was going to show her class preparation. Now, whether it was preparation to get to the 2nd grade or just a life experience, she was a preparer. And what she did was she went to the principal and she said, "Can I take a little piece of land out on the playground?" You know, everything outside of the building was a playground. "But can I take a little bit of that and use it to demonstrate growing seeds?" Now, whether she did this because she had the knowledge of the, probably did, knowledge of the sower and the seed, but she had the knowledge of preparation, and that was her intent to teach all those 6-year-olds. Okay, so envision this. Go back to when you were 6 years old. We all were so excited because we were making a preparation for our mother. Mother's Day is what, in the middle of May? Okay, so this was probably the first part of April, and she was preparing us because we were going to do something for our mother. We were going to plant flowers, and we were going to plant them for Mother's Day for our mothers. And she told us about preparing the soil. So she started from the ground, no pun intended, the ground up. And she said, "Let's go out and we're gonna prepare the soil." Well, we didn't know what that meant, but we were, 6 years old. We were going because it meant getting out of the classroom. All right, so she takes us out and we have our little turn in the soil, and she had some plant food and we sprinkled that all around. And then we went back into the classroom, and we hadn't graduated to individual desks. We were at tables. So each person got a little, remember the little white Dixie cups? We had a little Dixie cup, and she put a little bit of soil in, and then we took those great big pencils. I don't know why the education department decided that all 1st graders had to have pencils the size of their legs. But anyway, we were trying to hold those pencils to try to write. But anyway, we were gonna use it to make the hole to put the seed in. So we did that, and she gave us the seed. Now if any of you know anything about sweet peas, we were gonna grow sweet peas. So we put the seed in, closed it up, and we all marched single file, ladies, those of you who are teachers, single file up to the window ledge, put our little cups up there. She gave us a little bit of water. We had the sunshine from the windows, and that entitled us to sit with great anticipation to see the little sprouts come up. And whoever got the first one, you know they screamed the loudest. We were 6, so we didn't know control that much at that time. Okay, so all the seedlings come up. We go out to the little patch in the playground, and we planted our seedlings. And then we went back into our room, and of course, over the days, the weeks, it takes probably two or three weeks maybe, for sweet peas to grow. So anyway, we go back in, and we're so excited. So we have to make a basket for our mothers. So we take a piece of construction paper, cut out 4 squares at the corners, fold up those sides, use that, gosh, oh my word, the worst, that old glue with a paintbrush, and half of it was under the tables and half of it was on us, but anyway, that's all we had back in the day. I'm dating myself. But anyway, we fold up the sides, and it's ready for those sweet peas. And we go out when it's time, and we gather the sweet peas, and we take them, of course, our little basket has mother written on it, and we take them, of course, home. Our teacher was preparing us. Now, I know that's a very simplistic story. And believe it or not, I taught high school students. They would have probably been snoring back then, but anyway, it's okay. What happened in that moment in the first grade with 6-year-olds was we learned preparedness. The word that we have prepares us. Now, I know that was a very long oration about a 6-year-old, but still, I was prepared for whatever was coming at me in the 2nd grade, but also whatever was coming down the road in life. Because I've remembered that forever. The preparedness that first grade teacher put me on, that was the path. Okay, let's get back to this. Now, Jesus was a master at parables, he just was. And was so kind because he did talk in terms of whoever his audience was going to be, in terms of what they were thinking. And of course, we all know that the parable of the seed, it's about the growing, and it's about the soils. And so what we'll do now is just simply look at the scriptures, and if you have your phones available, you might want to scroll to Matthew 13. We're gonna, and look, this is another thing that's interesting about Matthew and this chapter. The way he organizes it, and of course you know this is divinely inspired and divinely revealed, these truths. But what he does is gives us a little introduction, then he gives us the story. Now, I like to think of it as a earthy, physical story, and then he inserts between the 2 comparisons, he inserts scripture from the Old Testament. How many of you have heard people say, oh, I can't read the Old Testament, it's about a bunch of wars, back and forth, blah, blah, blah. I want to just read the New Testament, they say. But heavens, if we don't have the Old Testament, we really can't get deep into the New Testament and have the knowledge of from whence we cometh. I mean, it's a history book, okay. And yes, there are wars, and rumors of wars, but still it gives us a basis to understand why Christ came. And of course, he came to tell about the kingdom of heaven, kingdom of earth. He also came to establish in our minds, when I say our, the people of his time, right on up to us, the church age. The church age is when the disciples preached, established the churches. When their time was up, it was the ministers. When their time was up, it was somebody else. On and on until it comes to whom? You and me. Because this church age is sandwiched by the two advents of Christ. When Christ came to this earth and when Christ left this earth to be a heavenly, up in the, sitting at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. Okay. Can all of you see my wonderful artwork? Hastily done. But anyway, the four souls we're going to look at in the first part of the scripture, and I've used the NIV. I thought it was easier to have a sheet of paper. But anyway, if you'll listen carefully, or if you have your phone, if I see your head down, I'll know you're looking at your phone and not going to sleep. Okay, the same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. We don't know anything about why he's in this house. But we do know that evidently it must have been crowded because he got out of there. He made tracks. But when he got out of there, guess what happened? Here comes such large crowds that gathered around him that he got in a boat and sat in it. And that's where he preached from the boat. It was almost, a commentator said that was like his pulpit, that the boat became his pulpit where he preached from. Okay, well, he sat in the boat, and while all the people stood on the shore, then he told them many things in parables. So we'll get to that in a minute. And he starts out with the first comparison, the physical, the earthy part of the comparison. The first part of Alice in Wonderland for the child. Okay. A farmer went out to sow his seed, and as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Now, how many of you have walked down a path, and the path was so hard, you would say, oh my gosh, this is hard as a brickbat. And if anything, if you dropped something, it would just sit on top of that soil. It was so hard. Well, that is what he is saying here. Because what happens as he scattered the seed, some fell along the path. and the birds came and ate it up. In other words, it was okay. The birds could reach the seeds because it was sitting up. There was no in depth. Okay, then some, that's the first. Wayside is the way my Scofield Bible says. But it's a path. All right, the next is the stony soil. Okay, some fell on stony places where it did not have much soil. Well, of course it didn't, because it was full of what? Rocks, of course. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants did what? Scorched. And they withered. And they didn't have enough root to go down deep and find the what? Moisture. The moisture. So they could survive. So what did they do? They died. Other seed fell among thorns. Ooh, how many of us have had a thorn in our fingers? If you say, oh, I've never done that before, then I would say you have forgotten your some memories. Worst feel ever. And they grew up quickly. Seems like they all grow up quickly. And if you don't put gloves on, you're in trouble when you try to pull one up. Okay, they grew up and choked the little seedlings, the plants. Some other seed fell on good soil. Well, finally, we get to the good soil, where it produced a crop, 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Why isn't it the same? Why isn't it 100, 100, and 100? We'll talk about that in a minute. And then here comes the famous, whoever has ears to hear. Oops, I forgot. Ears to hear, let him hear. Gosh, it's straight out of Isaiah. Okay, the disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? See, they are questioning Jesus. How about that? They're questioning Jesus and his method and his use of the parable. Have they forgotten about what the parable is? The comparison of the two parts of it, comparison of the earthy, physical side, as opposed to what? The spiritual side. Okay, and this is what he replies. He's talking straight at his disciples, because you know what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to go out and preach the kingdom and establish the church. All right, he replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you. You already know this. They don't, but not to them. This has not been given to them. Whoever has will be given more. Oh, listen to that. Whoever has will be given more. They will be blessed more. And they will have an abundance. I like the word abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have, will be taken from them. Ooh. I don't want to be in that category. This is why I speak in parables. So he's telling it. Now here comes the sandwich part in just 1 second. Those seeing, because he's still keeping on the unbelievers. He says, those seeing, they don't see it. Though hearing, they do not hear or understand. And in them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. Okay, here comes Isaiah. Isaiah says, through scripture, down the ages, he says, you will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For the people's heart has become calloused, meaning their hearts are hardened. You don't want to be in that category for sure. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes, meaning their eyes are spiritually blind. They can't see the other side of the comparison that the parable presents. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes. In other words, if they had knowledge of Jesus, otherwise they might see with their eyes, they might hear with their ears, and they might understand with their hearts. And this is the most important line. And if that is true of them, if they have grasped that, then they will turn. And I would heal them. So this is what those disciples are being charged with. You are to go and preach to these people who do not have eyes to see and ears to hear. But blessed are your eyes because your eyes see, and your ears because they hear. For truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. Now, this is a key sentence. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. He's going to come right out and tell them. He said, this is what you need to tell the unbelievers. You need to tell them so they will know about the mystery of the kingdom. They will know about the church age and what it means. And they're going to be part of that church that's going to be the foundation of the world. Okay, he says, listen to what this means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches it away. What was sown in their heart? This is a seed sown along the path. This is a seed on the wayside. This is a seed that hits the soil that is hard as a brickbat. This is a seed that hits the heart that is hardened or calloused. This is that seed. So this is what you want to help these people who are unbelievers, who don't have eyes to see and ears to hear. This is what you are to do to get them past the wayside. And who said birds came along and would, peck at the seeds and pick them up or whatever? But who is it really in the spiritual comparison? Satan. And he's always there to take away whatever he can. Okay, the seed fallen among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life. Did I skip one? Wait just a minute. No, I'm okay. I had my finger right over the top. Oh, anyway. All right, the seed fallen among the thorns.
Stony soul.
Okay, the seed fallen among the thorns refers to someone who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth chokes the word, making it unfruitful. So that's what those old thorns can do. And what do they do? They choke out the plants that will produce fruit, and they will cause the plants to be unfruitful. And then we get to the good soil. The seed falling on good soil refers to someone who hears the word and understands it. This is the one who produces a crop or fruit, yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. Now, earlier I wanted to say, why in the world isn't it 100, 100, and 100? Because people who are listening and trying to receive, they are at different places in their walk with Christ. So they would produce maybe 30, or maybe they are a little more advanced, 60, maybe a little more advanced, a little more seasoned, or whatever, 100. But also, it has something to do with the sower. Have you ever heard of green thumbs? Sure we have. Well, the green thumb people know how to make things grow. They do. And so somebody is going to be better at sowing the seeds than somebody else. So that's why the fruit gets to be in different quantities. Okay, so symbolically, we can look at this. Now, I'll end with this. Do I smell the coffee? No, I don't drink coffee, but anyway, somebody in here does, I know. So the sower, either, we could label the hand with the seed. We could initially label it Jesus. Jesus is the sower. Later on, it could be what? The disciples could be the sower. Later on, it could be ministers. They could be the sowers. And then, of course, it gets down to you and me being the sowers. Okay, what is the seed? The seed is the word. This is what produces the fruit, really. How that seed gets into the spirit and reaches the heart, not the calloused heart, not the hardened heart, but the softened heart that would receive, definitely receive what that sower has sown. And then, excuse me, I didn't know how to do soil down here, so I tried to do some rows, and they're pretty lousy looking rows, but anyway, it's okay. But this represents, and I tried to show how the ground had been prepared, and the seeds, of course, are sown there. But it certainly is to demonstrate that the soil is the heart. So we have the sower being Jesus initially, and it works on down. The word being the seed, and the soil being the heart. The end.